My name is Ray Collins. I'm 71 years old. I live in a small house outside Nashville, Tennessee. I'm going to tell you about a night I spent in a cheap motel in Mississippi and what happened in room 12 next door. I'll warn you up front, I don't know how this story ends. I never found out. And that, honestly, is the worst part of it. Because sometimes not knowing is worse than any answer. 1993. I'm 38 years old. I've been on the road 8 years, an experienced driver with a reputation for being reliable and on time. I drove mostly through the South, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana. November. I was hauling freight from New Orleans to Memphis, a regular route. I knew it almost by heart. But that night, I'd been held up in New Orleans longer than planned. Problems with the cargo paperwork, bureaucracy that ate up several hours. I left late and knew I wouldn't make it to Memphis without stopping. I pulled into a small motel somewhere between Jackson and Vicksburg, one of those roadside places with truck parking, 20 rooms, and a coffee machine in the lobby. The owner, an older man with tired eyes, took my cash, handed me the key to room 11, and told me breakfast wasn't included. I parked the rig, grabbed my bag, and walked to my room. Passing room 12, the one right next to mine, I stopped without meaning to. From behind the door came the sound of a woman crying, quiet, restrained. The kind of crying when a person is trying not to make noise but can no longer hold it all the way back. I stood there a second, listened. The crying. And then a man's voice. Quiet, but I caught the tone. Not comforting. Something else. Something I didn't like from the very first second. I went to my room, lay down, tried to sleep. Couldn't. Through the wall, I could hear what was happening in room 12. Not the words, the walls were thick enough for that, but the tone, the inflections, the general picture they were painting. The woman was talking, sometimes asking for something, sometimes explaining something. The man responded briefly. His tone of voice didn't change, even, low, controlled. Not aggressive, but somehow cold. Like a person who isn't angry, but has simply made a decision and has no intention of changing it. The woman cried again. I lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself this wasn't my business. Couples argue. Family conflicts happen. Not every woman crying is a catastrophe. But something about that flat, cold voice wouldn't let me rest. Around 1 in the morning, I checked my watch. Everything went quiet. I was finally starting to drift off when I heard a sound. Quiet. Just once. Like something falling, or like someone hitting the wall. Then, absolute silence. I sat up in bed, listened. Nothing. But that silence after the one sound, it was wrong somehow. Not the silence of people who've fallen asleep. Something different. I got up, went to the door, opened it. The hallway was empty. The door to room 12 was closed. From behind it, nothing. Not a sound. I stood there for a couple of minutes. Then I knocked on room 12. Silence. Knocked harder. The door was opened by a man, 40 years old, maybe a little more. Neat, too neat for 1 in the morning in a motel, as though he hadn't been to bed at all. Dark hair, carefully combed. Dressed, not in pajamas, but in slacks and a shirt. He looked like he'd been expecting someone to knock. "Yes?" he said. Even voice. The same voice I had heard through the wall. "Sorry to bother you," I said. "I'm in the room next door. I heard a sound, like something fell. I wanted to make sure everything was all right." He looked at me for a second. Something moved in his eyes. Assessment. He was quickly sizing up the situation. "Everything's fine," he said. "My wife dropped a glass. Sorry to disturb you." He stepped back slightly into the room, and I saw the woman. She was sitting on the bed, younger than him, maybe 30 or a little more. Dark hair, pale face. She was looking at me, and there was something in her look that I can't describe precisely even now, 30 years later. Not fear. I would have recognized fear immediately. Something else. Some kind of plea. Some kind of hope that had already almost gone out. "Are you all right?" I said to her. She opened her mouth, looked at the man, then back at me. "Yes," she said, quietly, evenly, like a person reciting a memorized line. The man took a step toward the door. "Thank you for your concern," he said to me. "Good night," and closed the door. I stood in the hallway, looking at the closed door of room 12. That woman. What had been in her eyes? I went back to my room, sat on the bed, thought. What had I actually seen? A woman who had been crying, that was real. A woman who was asked if she was all right and said yes, that was real too. No visible signs of violence, no direct request for help. I'm not the police. I have no right to force my way into someone's room just because I didn't like the tone of a stranger's voice. But that look. At 2 in the morning, I did something I'd never done before and never did again. I went to the front desk. The owner, that older man, was dozing in his chair. He woke up when I came over. I told him what I'd heard, what I'd seen. Carefully, without accusations, just the facts. The woman had been crying. I'd heard a sound. The couple had seemed unusual. The older man listened in silence. "Did they check in together?" I asked. He nodded. "In one car. He paid cash." "Did she seem all right when they checked in?" The owner paused, then said, "Now that you ask, she barely looked at me. He did the talking, she stood behind him." I asked if the motel had a phone to call the police. The owner called. 2 officers arrived within 20 minutes. Small town, they responded fast. They knocked on room 12. The man opened the door, just as neat, just as calm. The officers introduced themselves, explained there had been a complaint from a neighbor. "No problem at all," he said. "My wife isn't feeling well. We're on our way to her parents." One officer asked if he could speak with the woman. The man stepped aside. The woman got up from the bed, came to the door. The officer asked her name, asked if she was all right, asked if she was traveling voluntarily. She answered evenly, "Yes, yes, yes." The officer looked at her carefully, then asked, quietly so the man wouldn't hear, whether there was anything she wanted to tell him. The woman looked at the officer, then past his shoulder at the man standing a few steps behind, and said, "No,
Everything's fine. The officers came out of the room, talked between themselves, then came over to me. She says everything's all right, one said. No visible signs of violence, no direct request for help. We can't hold people against their will if they say themselves they're there voluntarily. I understood. The law is the law. But we wrote down their license plate, said the second officer. He looked at me evenly, without particular expression. Just in case. They left. I went back to my room. An hour later, I heard it through the wall. The man and woman came out of room 12. Footsteps in the hallway. The sound of the motel's exterior door. A car started in the parking lot. Drove away. And that was it. In the morning, I went back to the owner one more time, asked if he remembered the make of the car, the plate number. He'd written it down when I asked him to. He handed me a piece of paper. I didn't know what to do with it. I'm not a detective. I'm a truck driver. But I memorized the number, just in case.
I drove on, made it to Memphis, delivered the cargo, and thoughts about that woman didn't let go of me all day. I didn't tell anyone this story for many years, because what was there to tell? I don't know what happened. I don't know who she was. I don't know if she was in danger. Maybe she really was his wife, and they really were going to her parents, and she really was just not feeling well. Maybe not. I never found out. And that, as I said at the beginning, is the worst part of this story. Because I think about that woman, about that look she gave me before the door closed, that mixture of hope and something that had almost given up. I think, did I do enough? Could I have done more? Should I have knocked on the door immediately that same night, not waited until 2 a.m? The truth is, I don't know the answer to any of those questions. I did what I could within the limits of what I had any right to do. I'm not a detective, not an officer, just a person in the next room who didn't like the tone of a stranger's voice. But the road taught me one thing. Instinct rarely lies. When your gut tells you something is wrong, it's usually right. Maybe you can't prove it. Maybe there's no visible evidence. Maybe everyone around you is saying everything is normal. But your gut, it feels the difference between everything's fine that's real and everything's fine that's been learned by heart. That woman said, everything's fine. But her eyes said something else entirely. And I still think about her. Where they drove that night, what happened after, whether she found a way out of whatever she was in, if she was in anything at all. I don't know. I probably never will. But if you ever find yourself in a situation where someone looks at you with that kind of look, don't ignore it. Do what you can, even if it seems like very little. Even if people later tell you that you interfered in someone else's business. Better to interfere and be wrong than to stay out of it and spend your life with the question. Trust me, I know. Ray Collins, Nashville, Tennessee. See you next time.